welcome back to another episode of the Block Runner Podcast. I'm your host, William, always here with your co-host, Iman.
What's going on, dude?
On the sticks, we got TJ.
Hello.
What's up, guys? We're back.
We're back indeed. All right, another recap of the week, dude.
Yeah. So we were supposed to have a couple of interviews, and we had to reschedule them just because
Been busy.
there's been storms,
There has been storms.
and there's been siphonings.
That was a while ago, dude. That's old news.
Still, I'm still feeling it.
I could tell. You keep bringing that up.
I'm just saying, it happened.
Really?
We cannot forget that.
Of course not. Of course not. But still, okay. What else is happening?
There's been a minting.
Yeah. There's been birthenings. Yeah.
Birthenings?
Well, like not like
across the world?
Not like yes. That's important, right? More humans, you know.
I guess.
Good news, but not in relation to us. You know,
Oh, yeah.
No birthings happening here, other than a new DMT community has been birthed.
Yes, that's right.
Literally. Well, I mean, new communities emerge all the time, but this one's pretty fucking solid, dude. We got 6,500 or so people, roughly, all collectively aligned under this umbrella of like artistry.
Not only that, but within the framework of Bitcoin.
Which is fucking insane. I don't know. Like the fact that we've been dedicating ourselves so tremendously hard to like be a part of the facilitation of all this, right? Because if you've followed our history throughout the years, we definitely wouldn't consider ourselves anywhere near like art maxis or anything like that, right?
0%.
So there's actually some severe irony to all of this, you know. If you go back to like our podcast from like 3 or 4 years ago, where we're like, you know, that white cat meme that's like, he's doing this. That was literally us. So like the first art wave was kind of approaching NFTs. We're like, the fuck? I was like, why is everyone like freaking out over this stuff?
Yeah,
we were befuddled.
We were.
But yeah, that was our mistake because we didn't really understand, I guess, and we were a little too tunnel visioned on 3D space.
Yeah,
right. The metaverse specifically, Decentraland even more granularly specific.
But I think even without like Decentraland or the metaverse or 3D, I would have still been befuddled because it's so just like random.
Well, I mean, okay, in the context though of like there's this new tokenization wrapper standard for now, you know, non-fungibility, right? Like now you can tokenize unique assets on chain and stuff like that, right? Like this is a whole new vertical of experimentation, right? So what would you, in lieu of that, what would you expect to have been the killer use case or application of that?
That's a great question.
You know, if not art, right? If not images, what else?
That's a great question.
There's no way we just like skip to like, you know what? It's houses.
Yeah.
The first killer use case for NFT is like, we're just going to fucking remove all middleman activity in real estate. No, it's not going to happen.
That's a good point, dude.
It's got to be the lowest hanging fruit, right? Which is literally just images, you know?
But a 10K project was just out of like, just completely arbitrary.
Oh yeah, that's different. The whole 10K meta, I mean, something had to emerge no matter what, right?
Yeah.
But the point is, it's like the artists, that is like the collective energy that was kind of like formed.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, like a traditional artist, like a painter, a sculptor, like, you know, there's no mechanism, like electronic medium for them to do their art, right? Mm-hmm. And so with NFTs, you have like on-chain reference for trade of art. Mm-hmm. And it's now a global accessible thing through NFTs.
Yeah.
And so NFTs did represent something valuable to the art community because they had that, right? They didn't have that before. It was so local.
Yeah.
Right. You had to go to an art gallery, which was like a physical space, right? You were only limited by the radius there, right?
Correct.
And so with an NFT art, now it's like all the internet can access it.
Well, I mean,
so it was sort of like a renaissance for art.
Absolutely. Yeah. 1,000%. Just, I guess, content in general, you know, it can be applied across the board, and it has been, right, for 3D assets as well, game assets, all kinds of different things, right? You know, NFTs have pretty widespread application, right, and implication to like where we're heading to the future. So yeah, we were more so focused, you know, I guess on like the metaverse application side of things. Mm-hmm. So we're a little too like forward thinking as far as like, you know, what we thought the market would actually like truly utilize out of this technology. It's like, you know what? You know, asset ownership in the 3D immersive space is going to be a big deal. In the same sense as like, you know, asset ownership in the physical reality is a big deal, right? Like people need to have real ownership of, you know, the land that they have.
Sure.
You know, the businesses that are running around the world, things like that, right? And then these different economic models emerge as a result of that, you know? These are all things that need to be native to the metaverse, and that was our focus, right? So as a result, you know, the art renaissance happened right in front of us.
Yeah, that's right.
And we've pretty much faded it.
Well, but there's more reasons why we faded. I think it was because when it comes to art, it is it's hard to kind of like pick your horse. It's just
100%.
It feels as pure random. Like it is like, you know, if there's like a secret society who has like enough influence, they can just like pick a random art and pump it, and then like that's the valuable one.
Yeah, that was due to our lack of, I guess, like truly immersing ourselves into that community. I think once you actually do that, then it starts to become more obvious which of these actually resonate, right? That's all it is. It's resonance. It's energy. It's literally, that's all it is.
Yeah.
And those things can be quantified, and they can be measured, and they can be observed and felt. And then as a result of that, it's like, there's your indicator, right? Yeah. It's an entirely different like spectrum of due diligence than what we're accustomed to, right? And it's the reason why when we talk to Jason Fang, he's like, you know, the Eastern community has no fucking idea how to tap into that.
Yeah.
Right? Because, you know, for one, there's a communication barrier. It's like, how the fuck am I supposed to interpret like where the energy in the room is if I don't even know what you fucking people are talking about? You know?
Yeah.
So it really is like a whole culture. as corny and cheesy as it sounds, it really is a vibe, bro. You boil it all down to TLDR, it really is just a vibe, you know. And we're discovering that we are. We're like, well, I am personally.
Yeah, I mean, but
that's what it is.
But there's more substance now with DMT.
Oh, of course. Well, and that's a whole new vibe.
Yeah, I guess, is it a vibe, or is it more
something more than that?
More substantial than a vibe?
That's a good question. That is a really good question.
Well, I think it's more substantial because, you know, we like to equate DMT with physics a lot. Just because we can't break the rules in real life, right? The laws of physics, we can't break those rules.
Yeah.
In the same case, you can't break the data within Bitcoin, right? Once it's mined.
Yeah, when you start to contextualize that whole wrapper of what's actually happening in this DMT space, then vibes are out the window. Like physics is not a vibe, dude. Physics is like an absolute, you know? It's like
exactly.
It's a certainty. It's an unavoidable truth.
Yeah.
Right. It's law, literally.
Yeah.
It is governing laws of our existence. So that is why it's something beyond even like understanding.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, I mean, we can understand it as best as we can, but we don't really know what's going on in this universe.
It's innate in the universe. It's just there.
Yeah, and as a result, it's like everything has manifested. Right?
That's right.
And therefore, there's absolute beauty out of that, right? You don't have to like convince anybody of it. It is what it is.
Yeah.
Right. So.
And it has like embedded features as the fact that, you know, that you remove decision making from the creators, right? It's like we all share the same data source in the sense that we all share the same laws of physics.
Yeah.
And so you as an artist may look at this same source data and you see a metaverse, or you see a cat, or, you know, you see like all these like characters, and someone else may look at it and see something else. And I think that is interesting.
100%. Yeah. I mean, it literally is the substrate layer we have identified, and we're trying our best to kind of like put in front of everybody's face. It's like, dude, you guys need to be utilizing this.
Yeah.
Like, and, in order for that to be understood, I guess, so we need these demonstration pieces, which is what's occurring now, right? Nat Cats is a demonstration.
Yeah.
The Royals, the Nat Frogs, anything else that's going to kind of like be created after this point. You know, bitmaps as well. Like these things, they have to strike a chord, I guess.
Yeah.
With people.
Yeah.
To understand. It's like, you know what?
And that's like the job of the artists, right? They're the ones who vibe the most.
Yeah, that's where the vibes come in.
Yeah.
right? It make this whole thing like really make sense. It's like, you know what? There's something more substantial to this creation than the rest, right? Because it's rooted in something, again, that is so absolute.
Yeah.
But it's not understanding, right? The physics parallel is, I don't know. Some people might say that that's a stretch. You guys are just forcing that narrative,
I
possibly.
totally disagree with those people, but continue.
No, that's it. That's all. From my perspective, that's like the main counterpoint, right? It's like you guys are just, obviously Bitcoin is not like real physics or real law. You know, it's man-made, right?
Yeah, but it still takes energy.
Okay, yeah.
And that's independent of like anyone's opinion. It took energy to make the block data and secure all the data within it. In the same way it took energy to make oil and diamonds. It's the same energy. It's all the same.
Yeah. So what's actually going to convince people? Like some sort of like Einstein has to come in and draw off the equations on like a chalkboard. You know, it's like, you know, here's the actual definitive empirical proof that like there is a real energy like transfer here. Yeah. You know, things like this, and for that to like really resonate with people.
I've been thinking about this a lot actually, and when you break down an element into its pieces, right, let's say proton and neutron, you break those down, you get into quarks, and then so what separates one quark from another? What is it that what is the data that makes an electron versus the data that makes a proton? And the difference is it's just information. The information is what makes the differences between these like fundamental elements, right?
Okay, yeah.
And so now we're just talking about information now. And what is information? It's, for example, it's embedded within Bitcoin, the data within the blocks. Yeah. It's the same stuff. Yeah. Right. And so we're talking about the same things. Like that's what's like profound about, you know, this DMT thing. And this DMT thing is like, it's just a wrapper around what exists in the same way that we give hydrogen a name. And hydrogen, there's the word hydrogen is completely arbitrary, but it represents the same data that everyone sees across the universe. Right. So the same thing, DMT is the wrapper, right? It could be called anything else, but it's represents the same data that anybody's seeing on Bitcoin. Yeah.
Yeah. Ultimately, though, it's for what end game purpose. From our thesis is always like it drives into the direction of, I guess, the metaverse space, right? It's I don't know, the metaverse from our perspective seems lacking these unifying, I guess, like forces, right? Yeah, because otherwise it's just.
So that's what I mean. It's like before DMT, when we're looking at art, it just felt just random, right? And I feel like when people think about the metaverse, I bet you they feel the exact same thing that we feel about, or that we felt about art. It's just like random. Yeah. Right. It's just like it's just randomness. Yeah. And so, and intuitively they feel that, like in the same way that we did with art. And so, but they can't really pinpoint why it's, you know, people fade the metaverse so quickly. But if there was substance to it, you couldn't quickly fade it because it's like, it's backed by energy.
Yeah. Yeah. So what is like the ground zero, I guess, proof of concept of that from the metaverse landscape? Because I mean, we have bitmap, right? Is that it? Yeah. Like that is ground zero, right?
I think so. Yeah.
But it's largely still missing like that.
A proof of concept, a proof of viability. And so somebody needs to, you know, basically build something that has traction.
Yeah, but is that it? Like, just build like a cool game?
I don't know.
What is that thing that's gonna like? I don't know if it can't be that.
I feel like
we've been doing that for a long time.
I feel like it's a framework in the same way that DMT is a framework. We need a framework for construction, yeah, based off of like substantial source data, like Bitcoin.
Yeah, but what does this framework look like? Like, okay, so we've identified a kind of like a physics layer where we could kind of extract or maybe just manifest this thing as closely aligned to building blocks. Yeah. Right. The fundamental particles that make up our universe, like those are the building blocks of like how we can generate or manipulate matter in our physical reality to produce real good and value for our lives, right?
I think the key word you said is produce. And who are the producers when it comes to like the metaverse and once you have a framework, who produces on top of the framework? Developers.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah,
so if you give developers a framework so they can produce stuff, and you give them a platform where that the production can be enjoyed by people, then I think you have the starting point, right? If you don't have all these like elements, it's going to be difficult for anybody to do anything in the metaverse based on like these like substantial source data.
Okay. Well, then DMT represents like, I guess, like a foundational like starting point to that consensus, I guess, of like,
yeah,
we're going to produce digital goods or digital whatevers.
Yeah.
Whatever it is you want to produce in the digital space, like under this umbrella of understanding. And then here's like the non-arbitrary root of all of that. Therefore, we have this shared alignment of like how we can produce new value in the metaverse space. But what if somebody comes in and adds a new wrinkle to that? It's like, that's not enough, which I would probably agree with. That's still not enough.
Yeah.
You still need things like, I don't know, like mechanistic additions to that. It's like similar, again, if we're trying to do absolute parallels between what's happening in this reality to what should happen in the digital space, you don't just extract hydrogen out of the air and it becomes like a fucking a burger or something, right? There's a whole very complex...
Eventually we can do that, by the way. You could absolutely do that. I mean, you need more than just hydrogen, obviously.
Right.
You could just like, with nanotechnology, build a burger.
Hell yeah, dude. That's what I'm looking forward to, dude.
It's coming, dude.
I'm going to push a button on my... Well, actually, not even on my fucking Vision Pro. Vision Pro X.
No, just tell the robot downstairs to do it.
That's true. He'll know. He'll know when I'm hungry and I want a burger, dude.
Yeah.
And he's just going to come up and just like, dude,
it's already ready.
I got you, Damn, dude, what a fucking life that's going to be.
Yeah, it's not that far away either.
Right. So then that's the question, right? I guess it's just introduce this groundwork, this framework, and then, I don't know, I guess that opens up the avenue for these new, I guess, potential to emerge, right? It's like, you know what? Just using a deployment mechanism like the NAT framework isn't enough. It's like, here's your NAT deployment. Here's this new like protocol wrapper that is like sourcing some other non-arbitrary data components that determine, I don't know, some new law, semblance of a law. We're calling this friction, but like,
I see what you're saying.
Digital friction.
But you know what? I see where you're going, and I don't think we can just like do parallels to everything, right? I don't think you can, because in the digital realm, like I think you have new capabilities that we don't have in the physical realm. Like you can teleport, for example. You can go to different places without having to like wait for like a cab.
Well, that's my point. What if you can't do those things as a result of like a conglomeration of all these different theoretical like
limitations.
Limitations, but they're not arbitrary, right?
Sure.
Because they're rooted in something like a
I feel like you can play by those rules, and I think it would be interesting. Like the people would play by those rules. I remember there was a story in Second Life where someone went to jail, and they actually spent real time in jail.
Exactly.
And all they would do is like push-ups and stuff.
See, I think that might be that's right. I think that might be a good like parallel. Why Second Life actually achieved like a multi-billion-dollar economy at some point, like a real digital economy.
People were role playing for real.
That's what I mean.
They went to jail.
People had real jobs in that virtual world. Like they had to like clock in.
They did. Yeah.
And if you didn't meet those stringent requirements of your time and energy investment, you missed out. You got axed. Just like, so these are real parallels to physical reality, right?
Yeah.
And as a result, real digital economies emerge from that, and they sustain as a result.
They did.
That's important.
For like a decade.
It's still going on. It's not like at its peak like it used to be, but nonetheless, I feel like those things are critically important. Why? Because at the end of the day, we're still human beings involved, whether we're physical or digital.
Yeah.
And our brains expect certain things like difficulty and like, work and energy expenditure. Like that is a direct correlation to like return in value.
Sure. Absolutely.
Right? I can't just show up in some virtual space and I could fucking teleport and fly everywhere.
Yeah.
And like, I feel like I'm actually like doing hard work.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But that's not true. I guess you could still spend a lot of time in a virtual space and do that grind and still, you know, deserve high value return. But I don't know. This is the multi-generational, I think, question for people who actually care about this whole metaverse thing.
Yeah, and the most challenging part about what we're talking about is someone has to build this.
Well, yeah. Build like new attempts at this. And then not only that, you have to actually attract enough people to give a fuck about it. Traction, community, anything really. Yeah.
But I feel like DMT does give you that chance.
That's what I mean. Like just by getting this out the way we have.
Yeah.
Now we can start to, you know, poke at these potential vectors of like new digital value economics, I guess.
Yeah.
Like we still have to discover that. I feel like that hasn't even really been truly discovered.
Yeah. I mean, I think you shared a Twitter where there was like a project working on like these parallel mechanisms, like friction and things like that for the metaverse.
Yeah.
They were non-arbitrary using Bitcoin data.
Mm-hmm.
And well, I don't know what the project is now, but someone's thinking about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's going to become like an emerging field of understanding, right? It's like, you know, blockchain can be leveraged for more than just, you know, facilitating, you know, financial spends.
Yeah.
Right. There's a lot more utility here. Like we can leverage this thing, this source of data, energy, whatever, this low entropy state, and then, you know, we can convert that into like like some sort of rigid state of digital reality, I guess, something where we can, you know, impose these real limitations that are non-arbitrary for what end? I mean, from my perspective, it has to be some sort of metaverse use case or application.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, what we're really talking about here is the network effect, because when Satoshi developed Bitcoin, he was the first miner, and then Hal came in, he was the second miner, and that started the network effect.
Mm-hmm.
And people who believed in what this technology represented, they decided to mine it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it was a completely arbitrary decision. They could have just not mined it. They could have just faded it.
Yeah.
But that network effect ended up being a compounding situation where, as a result, the Bitcoin was actually worth something because people were spending so much energy and time and money to mine the thing.
Yeah, 100%.
So, I mean, the same thing is happening here. Like, maybe it's not DMT, but it's some sort of like framework that leverages this energy input of Bitcoin mining.
Yeah.
And can extract the value out of it, of this low entropy state that we keep talking about.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's a network effect. It's just whether or not people adopt it, right? It's just up to that.
Yeah, 1,000%. I think that is like the next stage to all of this. Like, you know, it's the creation, I guess, mechanisms on top of DMT.
Yeah.
Right. Which that I mean, there's so many different ways you could do that and concoct that and experiment that. But yeah, ultimately, it's all about, you know, getting traction around that and having more developers, like you said, utilize that. So
yeah,
there's something out there. Somebody published. I read it yesterday. Man, what's his name? Astral something.
Oh yeah,
he sent me a DM.
Yeah, Astral. Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
Damn it.
Well, while we
help me, dude.
While you find that, shout out to Crypto Doozy's grandmother.
Hey, Crypto Doozy.
Shout out to Gammy. I know that you watch the podcast, and we just wanted to shout you out and thank Crypto Doozy for, what is it, upgrading the Discord here?
Yeah, dude.
Server booster.
Yes. Anytime anybody wants us to shout out, you know, Meemaw, we're going to do it, dude.
Yeah,
for sure. Dude, thank you for watching. And, you know, it's truly humbling.
It is.
That anybody spends any fucking time of their day, like, listening or watching us. Seriously. Yeah. What the fuck are you guys doing, dude?
Yeah.
I don't know. Apparently there's, I guess.
There's some substance here, I guess.
I guess, dude. But nonetheless, you know, that is truly shocking. When I go home at the end of the day, I'm like, I think about that sometimes. Like, I can't believe people listen to us, dude. Well, why?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe we make sense, dude. Maybe we know something. I don't know.
I don't know yet. I don't know. I don't know if that's like some sort of like rooted in some deep personal like low self-esteem in myself or what.
Deep.
Yeah, it's just like unavoidable. It's just like deep wounds. It's like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Why would anybody listen to me, dude? But yeah, it is weird when I'm sitting there like doing the dishes, you know, doing like completely normal, like mundane human shit. Like, you know, like,
scrubbing the toilets.
That's right. Yeah, and it's like
people listen to me.
Yeah, it's like, what the fuck? It's like I'm just one of the peeps, you know.
Yeah.
But that is what's interesting about like I guess anything, right? Anybody has that potential, right?
Yeah, I mean when we decided to start the podcast, we just had a good conversation talking about crypto, but when you look at like other crypto YouTubers, their style is vastly different than ours. It's like hype. It's like pure hype the whole time.
Yeah, that's rooted in what we talked about last week, right? Is like there's an algorithm, there's a mechanism to this whole game.
That's true. That's a good point.
So all these people, they're just
but
literally playing the game.
Right, but no, I don't know. The game is like the title and the thumbnails get you in. But once you're in, it's like super hype still.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know. We're just hitting a different kind of like audience. I think that's what it is.
Astral Architect is his name. So shout out to him. Yeah, he published something called Digital Dimensions Theory.
Yeah, I remember that.
And I read it last night. It's a Medium article. It's interesting. He's been obviously talking a lot about DMT and
so it's DDT.
DDT.
Yeah.
Sounds like a fucking like a wrestling.
It is a wrestling move. Yeah, DDT.
Which one was that?
Diamond Dallas Page. Something like
That's
that.
DDP.
Close enough, dude. But you know what I mean?
No, but that's definitely a real wrestling move.
Is it?
Like,
yeah, it's like hit him with the DDT.
Yeah,
some shit like that, and like it's like a neck breaker move.
Yeah,
type shit.
Yeah.
That's what it sounds like. But no, it's digital dimensions theory, which you go into it, it's like an idea of a framework for, I guess, kind of like building upon what we just talked about. So
okay,
definitely look into that. So that's what I like to see is people starting to think about the next, the layering of things, right? Because it's gonna require a lot of that, dude.
Speaking of layering, I mean, we've only indexed one element of Bitcoin so far. And there's 37 at least. And then that one element spawned like 200 or so like deployments, patterns.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy.
Yeah.
That is wild to think about. Like that's the depth. It's like literally we've only discovered like one atom.
Basically.
Like we've discovered hydrogen, and that's the only one like we could do anything with. It's like we still have a whole like table of elements.
That's right.
To kind of like activate and become like part of our, again, the building blocks.
Yeah.
So until we got a long way to go, dude.
Yeah.
Fuck. Talking about early days, we're working with hydrogen here only.
Yeah.
Even though like the universe is mostly made out of hydrogen, right?
Yeah, it's like the easiest element to discover.
Yeah. So that's what we've done. So it's like, fuck. Everything is pretty like rudimentary at this point.
Yeah, 100%.
But imagine the unlock once all the fields are like, are part of this substrate.
Yeah.
That you could utilize as a creator. Fuck, man. I think you literally, once we're at that point, you literally have godlike power, I feel like.
Yeah, I think so too.
I think we're going to get to a point where we could breed like an actual, as close to a living organism out of that.
Yeah.
Potentially.
A consciousness.
Oh, God. What if? Could you imagine if like some consciousness emerges from this?
It would be a non-arbitrary conscious.
Well, yeah. Kind of like,
Scarlett Johansson's like voicing the...
You just create like you associate like environmental cause and effect to like non-arbitrary pattern cues, right? That are occurring in these blocks.
Yeah.
And then you inject an artificial intelligence like to this. It's like those are the neural signals and the neural connections that can form as a result or in reaction to what's happening.
Sure.
And this is like a thought experiment here, right?
Yeah, and it would be like completely unique. I mean, and then you just you leverage that uniqueness to create like or
whatever,
like personality.
Exactly. And then now it's like, okay, now you could just deploy that into like a simulated virtual environment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Why would you want to do that though? Because in my mind, that's what I would want to do.
Well, it's sort of like the process of evolution. It's non-arbitrary. Just like it just goes.
Yeah, this is like the thought loop that gets you into like simulation theory. It's like we're theorizing like what we could do.
Yeah.
With like optimal DMT framework, optimal like VR immersive space.
Yeah.
Optimal like just video game engines and stuff like the future where everything is just like running on quantum computers.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And like there is like no limitation to anything.
Yeah. I remember I would see like you would eat like a sandwich and there'd be crumbs on the table. And I would think, as a kid, I would wonder, it's like, how do these crumbs like remain here? Like, because we used to play video games so much, where like you would crash into a building and then the debris would be, and then the debris disappears.
Yeah.
Right. It's like because it's saving the memory, on the computer, right? And so like this crumb is just staying here, like it just stays. It's like, man, this computer that we're in must like have infinite memory. I would think that as a kid. It was weird.
That is a weird thought for you to have, dude.
TJ, you never thought about that?
And then your mom got mad at you because you had ants.
Yeah. It's like, wow.
Like, Mom, this is science.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, you're telling me there's like a whole like colonies of ants like thriving?
And then so that's a good point, dude. And then it's like the crumbs would stay there and then the ants would take it away.
Yeah.
And like maybe that's the form of the computer like cleaning up the RAM space.
I don't think so. That's it. Like
more complex.
Yeah.
I'm sold, Will. I'm in on this theory.
This simulation theory, dude.
Yeah.
It's a computer and it's like it's self-cleaning with like these.
Oh yeah, it's self-balancing for sure. Yeah. And it's maintaining its like its internal state of homeostasis.
Yeah.
At the end of the day.
Yeah, everything's balanced.
Yeah, those crumbs, that's wasted energy, dude.
It's
potentiality there. It's like somehow this needs to be utilized either by the ant.
Yeah.
Or it's just gonna absolute decay over time.
It will.
That force has to exist, right?
That's true.
These things. See? We need these. We need these forces, dude.
That's true.
We don't have any force in the digital space.
Dude, that's a good point.
Not a single one. Therefore, like nothing really makes sense.
That's a good point.
Nothing matters. Nothing makes sense.
So we need like a half-life.
Yes.
We need these. You're right. We need these forces that just continue. Like
they're just there.
They just but they push stuff. Like things aren't just like static. Nothing's static.
Yeah, imagine exactly. So you could do that in the metaverse, right? Like imagine Decentraland. It's a vast land of grass and like greenness.
Yeah, they just made an update, by the way. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, shout out Decentraland. Still cooking. Yeah. Shout out the community if you guys are still like lurking and watching our channel.
Yeah,
we haven't forgot about Decentraland. It's just we're peering outwards to see what else is afoot.
Yeah.
But Decentraland, good job, guys. It's still cool. But man, yeah, but Decentraland is a good example of an arbitrary, metaverse reality, right? Where you can impose these things like decay or whatever, which I think introduce vectors of value, right? It's like, this land diminishes over time.
Yeah, absolutely. Like your tree, if you don't put water on it,
right.
It just like decays.
Yeah, well, why would I care? Well, then if it decays, then it becomes an obstacle, an obstruction on your fucking property, right? Just like things decay. Dude, I drove through what's the town? Fucking Livingston this weekend. All right, I mean, if you're not from Houston, you guys know what the fuck I'm talking about. But it's basically like a meth town. it's fucking rough, dude.
One of many.
Yeah. I was driving to the Indian reservation casino.
Yeah,
and I haven't been to that town since like my childhood. But man, it's run down. It's a direct representation of physics.
Sure,
sure. Everything is just decaying in that fucking town. I was like, I was amazed by that. And
it is amazing.
And it's a representation of like the low state of their like local economy, right? There's no incentive or motivation to like bring new life to that decay, right?
Yeah.
It's just let's just let the force of nature just like ruin it.
Yeah, clean it out.
Yeah. Otherwise, if there was incentives, like, let's hire new contractors, new fucking landscapers, and let's like upkeep this thing that costs money. That's value. That's energy input.
Yeah.
You're going to expect some sort of like higher ROA off the top of that.
But, sure.
We do these things in like, metropolitan areas, right? We're upkeeping our environment because, there's a economic expectation. There's economic incentive to do such things. So again, these are all rooted to physics and these non-arbitrary laws. Right?
Yeah. Those maintenance fees are a pain in the ass, dude.
That's right. But it's what keeps the circle going, dude. It's
true.
Essential.
Yeah, I mean, if we didn't have this like capitalistic mechanism, like it would force us to have some mechanism of maintenance at least. Like somebody still has to clean it up, right?
Yeah.
Somebody has to fix it,
Yeah.
no matter what, whether there's money or there's no money.
Totally agree. Yeah, so these are the things that I think have been largely untapped. You know, we've been in this metaverse space for a while, and it's like we see these like big players come in. They raise hundreds of millions of dollars from VCs and shit, and then they come in and talk about it's like what we really need are like giant parties and like, you know, big events and stuff like that. And it always like blows our minds. Like I can't believe like that's what they think, you know, the metaverse needs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's like you're trying to create like this second ecosystem, second society, and it's like all we need is just more parties.
Yeah.
Like it's just like a weird conclusion.
They just completely skipped over like, you know, many generational attempts at like value discovery, I guess. You know, parties, you know, I don't know. It doesn't, I don't think that's the true killer.
No, can't. Yeah. Killer app of the metaverse? No. Yeah. So it's funny. We started talking about King, the Royals art, and then we inevitably end up in the metaverse.
Well, I mean, it's unavoidable for ourselves, at least.
Yeah.
I mean, anybody else, I don't think that most people don't think like us when it comes to this stuff, because I don't know. I don't know what it is. We're just deeply pulled in by this this metaverse thing.
Yeah, I mean, it all points to the metaverse, right? I mean, think about Facebook, a $1 trillion company pivoting to the metaverse. Like that says something. Even though most people disagree with the move, it says something about the metaverse.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I mean, and that's not why we predate that whole thing. Like we were interested in this. I don't know, it just resonates with us. Feels like an obvious vector of like human direction for sure.
I feel like Mark Zuckerberg thinks like us, like
I would think
in
so
closed
too,
doors
to dedicate that much financial resource to
100%.
Yeah, 100%. So I mean, yeah, it's not obvious. Like, you know, the things that we're doing today. You know, if you've been watching us for the last few years, you're probably like, dude, these guys pivoted away from the metaverse, right?
Yeah,
I think a lot of people would assume that.
Yeah,
because it looks that way. It's like, you know what? They just abandoned the metaverse.
Right.
They're abandoning Bitmap.
Yeah.
They've abandoned Decentraland. They've abandoned it all. You know, and they're just now we're art maxis. It's like, no, you just didn't know all along. All this stuff was like, you know, headed to the metaverse.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, everybody is inevitably headed to the metaverse.
Right.
It's inevitable.
Yeah. So we're giving these things that have already kind of like been created and put in the forefront as like this. These are the things that matter. In like this digital arena, this digital space, and we're giving it like an actual metaverse like integration angle, like a real one.
Yeah,
that has like real like lifelong staying power, right? Which is obviously part of our mission, I guess. If we're gonna do anything with our life here on Earth, it's like, you know, if we could put like a little bit of progress in that direction, it's like, you know, we've figured something out.
Yeah,
that might actually give the metaverse some real staying power and like make it all make sense.
Yeah.
For future generations to kind of like build on top of, like we're talking about, like people are already thinking of like the next layers.
Yeah,
dude, we've done enough.
We did. All we got to do is just knock that first domino.
There you go.
And if we were able to do that, then we're done.
Yeah, it's not 100% clear yet if the domino is like in tipping mode or not.
Yeah.
I don't know yet.
Yeah,
like in my own mind, it feels like we're fucking putting as much force against that domino for it to like tip over.
Yeah.
I don't know what we need to witness to like know definitively. It's like, all right, dude, we gave it enough force to like it's falling.
Yeah,
and it's gonna hit the next one.
Yeah,
the next ones. I don't know. Like, what do you think? What is that proof? Like,
I don't know. Developer involvement. I think that's what the proof is. I guess the most absolute proof is just like volume, right? If there's a ton of volume and like on top of DMT, then.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess we'd have to see like an actual cycle emerge where like, you know how these crypto cycles, like let's go back to 2021. You know, we had the DeFi cycle, we had the NFT art cycle, then like NFT game cycle, then like the metaverse. And there's like little cycles here that happen within like a grand crypto bull cycle narrative.
Yeah.
So DMT has to be one of those.
Yeah.
Right?
That's true. Yeah.
It has to.
I think so. That would be the confirmed domino tipping.
Yeah, whatever results from that, whether it's like another pump and dump, like NFTs,
Yeah.
like the metaverse, like GameFi, whatever.
I mean, that's a pump and dump wouldn't represent. It's like market psychology. People get over exuberant.
Yeah, pump and dumps aren't bad things. Like Bitcoin perpetually pumps and dumps.
Yeah, it does. Just look at the chart.
Yeah, it's a pump and dumper, dude. Satoshi put out like a literal pump and dump insider group. And basically, like every 4 years, everybody knows when to pump and when to dump.
Yeah,
it's like machinery at this point.
Yeah, that's true.
It's not a bad thing. So if DMT has its own little pump and dump moment, then I feel like that's a domino just fell.
Yeah, agreed.
It's unavoidable at this point.
See, and dude, we think like scientists, dude. We're making these predictions because it's like discovering black holes for the first time is like you look up into the sky and there's like these fluctuations of like different orbits around galaxies and stuff. I was like, there must be some sort of deep gravitational pull to make that little wobble of a planet occur. So they assumed it's like that has to be, there has to be a black hole. Not until they discovered it, they confirmed it. But that's what we're doing here. We're making these predictions that once we're able to have like that DMT like hype cycle,
okay, yeah,
then that's when the domino has fallen.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, because I mean, again, at whatever results, because we know how crypto works, it's gonna in its early stages, just like the stage we're at now, everything looks pretty fucking inspiring and like everyone's pretty genuine and organic with like their interest in this stuff. People really wanted to like create a new ripple effect, something like initiate something of substance in this whole Web3 blockchain realm. But at some point, if this gains enough traction, it's going to attract exploiters, capitalists, opportunists, whatever.
Yeah,
they're gonna pick up on this narrative and this technology that's being built during this stage, and they're gonna kind of like corrupt it a bit in a sense. Or,
of course,
I don't even know if corrupt's the right word. It's just they're just gonna
they're gonna abuse the narrative.
There you go.
Yeah.
They're really, abuse is the right word, and maybe that's not necessarily
a bad thing
because that we're saying that's the domino point, right? Where we know it's fallen.
Yeah, it's just like inventing a car and someone gets in and runs over a bunch of people.
Exactly.
The car is not a bad thing,
right.
So,
yeah, I agree.
So everyone has to do the research. Just because it's based off of like the source of Bitcoin doesn't mean it's not a scam.
Yeah.
Right. So you still have to do your research. This isn't like scam proof.
Yeah, and that's part of it, right? It's like, we have to be aware of like how these things proliferate, and we're very aware, right? Because we're not just not just builders. Like we're market observers. We study these markets.
Yeah,
we understand them deeply, right?
Yes.
We've for the last 5 years, that's all we've been like paying attention to.
I mean, that's how we're able to make such good calls.
Yeah,
right. Because we understand how the markets work.
Yeah, we understand. So in order for DMT to like actually not die, like, because we don't want it to die, right?
Yeah.
Right? I'm asking you.
I think so.
I think this is worth like preserving.
I think so.
I think this thought loop, like, I think we want more people to think like us.
Yeah.
I genuinely believe that would be an ultimately net positive for.
Well, there's a reason. There's a reason why that is because things need to be repeatable, right? Like when you do a science experiment, we always talk about science, right? When you do a science experiment, I predict, gravity is 9.8 meters per second squared, and you're like in China or whatever. You see my write-up on how I did this experiment and how I proved gravitational forces on Earth is 9.8 meters per second squared. You take this and you repeat that experiment and see if William is actually right. So you run that experiment, you repeat it, and then, yes, you get the same result. It's like, yes, confirmed.
Yeah.
Right. And so when it comes to like these frameworks and we want things to be repeatable. You want like artists to come in the same case, like King, like successfully minted out, blocked out an art project. You want other artists to do the same.
Yeah.
And to repeat this thing because that is like how things become successful.
Yeah.
If you do something and it's like a one-hit wonder, and we talked about this before.
Yeah.
Like there's nothing there.
Correct. Yeah, I totally agree.
So it's frameworks are important.
Yeah, but I say that not just like I don't know.
your desire for it to be sustained.
Yeah, I don't know how to like frame it. Like, and for it to not come off as like some sort of like egotistical like rub. You know what I mean? It's like, I want this to succeed, right? And there's no way to say that without it sounding like
self-serving.
Yeah, like I'm just this fucking narcissist. Is like, dude, you just want to like, you know, be able to say like you did something. Like,
I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
I don't know. But
like if you make something, you want that thing you made to be successful. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's. I guess it is.
Yeah, I guess. But typically, people don't like just come out and, because I in my mind I have an understanding of like what it's going to require it to achieve that status, right?
Yeah, how difficult it is.
Well, not just the difficulty, and then like the market forces, the human condition around it, like the psychological acceptance, I guess, of it.
Yeah,
because we've seen it happen many times. You know, watching early days of Axie Infinity, right? We were there.
Yeah,
it's like these fucking just game developers in Vietnam.
Yeah.
You know, they just had an idea, like, you know what, this is pretty cool utilization of NFTs and tokenization. It's like, we're gonna build like a semblance of like a closed loop game economy here.
Sure.
With these little puffballs that battle each other.
Yeah.
In those early days, those guys thought like, you know, this is going to transform the gaming industry, and nobody believed in them, right? It's like, you guys
nobody, not even us, dude.
We were like, this is a good idea, but there's no way these little fucking puffballs, like, this is gonna be it, right? But man,
sure it was.
It was it. It was the catalyst. That's the thing, and now we're on our way to actually transforming the entire gaming industry potentially.
Yeah,
because of that. That was a domino.
Yeah, the entire gaming industry. They're like, should we do NFTs? And like the Web 2 gamers were like, no, you shouldn't.
For now,
yeah.
Until like they
have children, then the children would be like, yes, NFTs.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like, fuck, dude. These gamers are just getting straight railed, like
they are
financially.
Yeah,
I know, because I'm pocketing, some of this. It's like just filtering money to Roblox.
Yeah.
You're getting no return on that, dude. It's like, what the fuck?
But you're getting entertainment return, dude.
Well, not me.
No, not you.
Yeah, my child is, dude. She's over there just like having a fucking blast and shit, and then bank account go down.
Yeah, she's like, deploy more funds, stat.
Deploy more capital, stat.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so, but not realizing, there's again a closed loop economy that could be put in place to where like these expenditures don't just result in a vacuum.
Yeah.
Right. But again, so that was one domino. What are some other ones, dude? I guess just NFTs in general. So the point is, we witnessed like something like this where somebody's putting out like a new idea, new technology, new frameworks, whatever. And we know what it takes for it to actually like get to an adoption status. Right?
Yeah.
It is quite the tremendous like feat. Right?
I think so. Yeah, I mean, I always think as like we have NFTs and we have fungible tokens. Is there any like fundamental like element missing like out of this equation?
Yeah, I think. Well, it depends for what application. Like, what do you mean?
Well, I mean, do we have all the tools necessary to build out the metaverse now?
No, absolutely not.
So we have like fungible tokens, we have NFTs, we have like the concept of ERC 1155s, and then we take these and we say all this is arbitrary. Let's just base it off like a shared source data known as Bitcoin. And now we have like this sort of meta protocol on top of these concepts.
Yeah.
And then I'm just wondering, is there anything else that needs to be created in order to create like this economic flywheel?
Yeah. I mean, dude, you literally just asked like the most
complex question of all.
Yeah, you did. Like, that's it. That is the big question. I think that is, I feel like that's what this is all about, is figuring those things out. And every cycle, like a new piece gets discovered.
I think so too. Yeah.
Yeah. Like that was last cycle's discoveries. This cycle, I feel like this whole non-arbitrary injection into that equation gets us closer.
Yeah, because we haven't seen anything like new happen yet.
No. Yeah, even the new stuff happening on ordinals, it really is just a regurgitation of last cycle's discoveries.
Yeah.
Right? It's just reapplying it to Bitcoin, but it's missing the whole point of like the application of Bitcoin to begin with, like where the actual value
exactly
stems from.
Yeah.
Right. And the DMT directly addresses that and utilizes that.
Exactly.
That's the difference, right? So that's where, again, I go back to like, fuck, dude, this thing actually needs to work. It needs to succeed.
Yeah.
And I'm trying my best to wrap my head around that in a selfless way.
Yeah, and we're trying to balance like screaming off the rooftops about DMT.
Yeah.
I mean, because you go on Twitter and there's some people screaming off the rooftops constantly in full caps mode about meme shit and just like stupidity stuff.
Because you have to, because it lacks substance.
Yeah, because you have to. Correct.
There's no other way.
Yes.
To manipulate human psychology to that degree, other than just shouting.
Yelling,
shouting at
constantly.
them perpetually, until you've completely like warped their brains.
Yeah, their reality is like, you know what? Memes are actually valuable. It's like, except they're not. Yeah.
So like that. So that in context of that, then what we're witnessing is actually what's supposed to happen.
Probably so.
Yeah,
because we're definitely not gonna tweet with all caps.
Yeah, I get those DMs. It's like, guys, it's like DMT's cool and all, and I'm like a bag holder now, but like, you guys aren't marketing good enough. You need to do what Leonidas does. I literally have gotten those messages. It's like, you guys suck. You're not Leonidas. You'll never be Leonidas.
Right.
I just name dropped it. Yeah, that's what we're talking about. Because I get those DMs. It's like, dude, you need to be all capsing. Every day. And it's like, dude, you need to be begging these centralized exchanges to fucking to just whatever their listing protocol is light it on fire for you guys.
Yeah.
Well,
you know what? We struggle with that in the sense that maybe they're right.
Maybe
they're right. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like you can have like something with real substance, but if nobody knows about it, nobody cares.
Yeah. Well, that's what I mean is like the struggle of, because we think this is important. We think it's going to be a critical like component of the metaverse development landscape into the future. So it's like, to what degree, I guess, do we push that?
Yeah,
understanding.
I mean, first of all, it takes a lot of energy to tweet, especially for us. Like, I don't know what it is.
Well, luckily, there's a lot of you guys out there like tweeting on our behalf. So again, this is another like shout out to you guys. And it's all about community building, right? If we could build a strong enough community, which I think we're on our way.
Yeah.
I don't know. You guys tell us. Like, I don't know.
They're weak hand holders, like bag holders.
I don't know. It's just, the community always like self nurtures in a sense. But yeah, these things are delicate. But this is ultimately like what crypto is about, right?
Yeah. That's the point. It's like, we could tweet with all caps. Like constantly, we could do that, but there's nothing stronger than everybody else tweeting the same thing, having like the same directional force.
Yeah.
Right. There's nothing more, all caps is not going to beat that.
Yeah. To me, the thing that it strikes me as more impactful than just like, if it was just us on Twitter, all capsing all day. And, it's to seeing like new creators show themselves on Twitter and like unveil their intentions. It's like, what, this DMT thing is interesting and here's what I want to create. Like we're seeing those things kind of like manifest daily, which is cool.
Yeah.
From my perspective, that's what I want to see. That is like the actual substantial proof that like something of value is being created here.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's really what we want to see is like, real adoption, real utilization from creators, developers. We got Natomons on the way. Which they want to build an actual card game, like a real game.
Yeah.
Where like the actual, like the parameters of like the outcomes of these games are rooted in non-arbitrary.
Yes.
These non-arbitrary forces again that are discoverable and applicable.
Dude,
to
maybe
DMT.
that's the meta. As you said it like a non-arbitrary force. Maybe the force is the game logic.
Yeah.
And like that is the force that everyone who plays that game has to follow because that is sort of like the law in that ecosystem.
Yeah.
And maybe that is we've commoditized force creation here. Like it's all the same source data, but you create your own forces.
Yeah, I think that's another wrinkle to all this. Like, initial force is like the force of existence, right? That's what the NAT framework does. It's like, things can't just arbitrarily manifest under the DMT framework, right? Again, it's all rooted to non-arbitrary data existence in the Bitcoin block. So
yeah,
that is like a force, right? Like things don't just spontaneously appear.
Sure.
Like physical, physical forces of nature need to align in order for like new life forms to exist, whatever.
Yeah.
So, that's what NATs are, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, you're saying the introduction of new forces, again, these are the new layers that need to be added on top of this. NAT is an open framework. Now anybody can kind of impose like non-arbitrary existence in the digital space, right? So yeah, what are the non-arbitrary like game forces? Somebody needs to create a framework for that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Another one.
Yeah. Why not?
Like an extension of this DMT thing, right?
Yeah.
But it's a tall ass, dude, because it's
a
lot of work. We know firsthand how difficult putting forward a new framework and actually executing and showcasing why it's a good idea, why it's important.
Yeah.
Getting enough traction off of that to attract other developers to utilize it. Like it is a feat.
Yeah. I mean, we spent several weeks working on this like privilege auth PvP minting, and 2 to 3 of those weeks were like just testing.
Yeah.
And then like a whole like 8 days of actually launching with King and the Royals.
Yeah.
Like it was a lot of work. And the whole point of this was to, clean it up to a point where someone can go to Mscribe, launch their own token and not even ask us anything.
Yeah.
And like they run the whole thing by themselves.
Yeah.
And that's essentially what we want, because we can't be, at the foot of everything every single launch.
No, absolutely not. Yeah, 100%. We're on our way.
Yeah.
So, did we talk about the launch yet?
Well, let me kind of zoom in here, and if you're watching this, it's already minted out, but 1645 out of 2408, 400 were reserved for the team, so we got like 350 left.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, if you were around for the last few weeks, man, it's been a battle. So there's like a direct representation of what we're talking about, dude. It's not easy. It's fucking hard to do this stuff, dude.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, we were in the dev calls like the whole time for the last 3 weeks, and it's not trivial,
but it's worth it, dude. I mean, yeah, 3 weeks of pain and suffering, really what it is. It's okay.
Yeah, but I guess when you put it like that, it's only like 3 weeks. But man, in real time, it was like endless.
I know. Well, that's just Mscribe. We've been developing Mscribe as a platform for like several months now.
Yeah,
and but coming down to this, like actual wide scale utilization of like one of its killer products or features, it definitely amplified the work effort requirements to like make sure all this is maintainable and like actually functional and all that stuff. So I mean, that's the reality of it. We're not like this Giga Chad team. We don't have 100 devs. We have like 2 or 3.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, fuck, this is how it is, in these early days, and it's a lot of work. Right.
Right.
So yeah, those comparisons, like, dude, why is this not like working like Magic Eden does? Well, just go to Crunchbase. Do like a Crunchbase search real quick of Magic Eden.
Yeah.
And just look at how much money they've raised from VCs. We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah.
That's the difference. If you're wondering like why Mscribe isn't like as well lubricated. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The lubricant is literally just pouring money into these platforms, right?
Yeah,
and
pretty
like,
much.
Yeah, that's it. Like you get better support, everything, right? Because I mean, literally, you're just pouring bodies into the machine,
Yeah. So all we need is just more lube, dude. That's it.
Everyone needs more lube, for sure.
Yeah, I guess you can't go wrong with that.
Yeah, but we're getting there, dude. We're lubing up.
We're definitely lubed.
Yeah.
But yeah. So this is going to be minted out, and I guess when you're watching this, 2 days later is going to be the art reveal.
That was a good transition, Will.
Yes. It really was.
Yeah.
From lube to reveal.
Yeah. I mean, that's what happens when you, when you reveal stuff, right? After
I guess so,
you get
dude.
lubed up.
I guess, dude. Oh, Lord. Well, what are you expecting from this reveal, dude?
Well, I mean, we've only
'Cause we
gotten like
started-
a sneak peek of the art. And so like it's just like sparse like traits here and there. Like we haven't seen like the whole gambit of what's available. So
yeah, King has kept this very like confident.
Yeah.
Confident?
confidential.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For good reason, because I think that this has been like the best showcase of like why this blockpad is pretty fucking cool. Everybody like enjoy the block claiming process, and you know everybody that's part of the fun, right? You're just looking at these numbers and you're coming up with theoretical like renderings just based off of like a string of numbers. Like maybe this one might be rare.
Yeah.
Maybe not, you know, and that's the fun of it, right? It's the mystery, it's the conjuring of ideas, the imagination, right? That's what you're tapping into. And again, you know, every single one of these blocks has an individual unique data set.
Yeah.
And that's what makes this like truly fascinating, right? Like you just can't wait to really see what this turns into.
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely.
And yeah, we started this whole thing off with like the ultimate irony is like, you know, you know, you would expect people like to be pushing like the evolution of digital art to be like have a background in art, and we're not that like at all.
No, but that's what's so interesting about DMT is that because of DMT, we are interested in it.
Yeah, I'm dude. I love this shit actually.
Yeah,
I wouldn't mind if like this is what I did for the rest of like the year. Just like I genuinely enjoy like claiming these blocks, and like now I'm waiting for the unveil, like with everybody else. You know? This is an enjoyable experience, you know.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's just it's interesting, like the stark differences between like an arbitrary art piece and like a non-arbitrary one. It's like all of a sudden non-arbitrary piques the interest of people who wouldn't be interested in like arbitrary art.
100%. Again, yeah, that's the evolution and expansion of this all. It's like we're increasing the demographic reach of like, well, you know, these products of Web3.
Yeah.
Like who is it going to appeal to, right?
That's right.
You know, so we've captured Will.
Yeah.
Which
shocking.
Is very hard to do. If you don't know anything about Will, dude, he fades most things, you know?
And I'm right most of the time.
Yeah, you're very stubborn with your like appreciation of things.
Incorrectly so.
You can't argue with that, dude.
Has to be earned.
Yeah, it has to earn Will's respect, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Agreed. I think that's fine.
That's the position you should be in.
You're not easily swayed, in other words. Like
no.
I can't shout at you a meme and you're not going to buy my meme coin.
No, definitely not.
You're missing out, dude.
But I will buy some GameStop though, because screw those hedge funds.
Okay.
Right?
There you go.
For the culture.
Yeah.
For the culture.
Only for the culture.
For the people. And
for GameStop.
For them games. Oh yeah, dude.
All right, that's it for us. That's been the podcast. We talked about King, the Royals, DMT, the metaverse. And forces, non-arbitrary forces.
Yeah, we need forces.
NAFs, dude.
Is that a thing yet? Non-arbitrary forces? I'm pretty sure it is. I don't know.
Yeah.
Whatever, NAFs. Let's fucking go, dude. NAFs coming soon.
All right, guys. If we miss anything going on in the space, let us know in the comment section below. I appreciate you guys for watching, and we will catch you in the next podcast.
Peace.